For the first time since Ben and I have been covering politics, the Republicans successfully funded the government. This is the first time since we've started making videos that the Republicans and the Republicans in the House alone have successfully voted to fund the government.
Yep.
And they did so in a way that repudiates years of Republican precedent. Republicans have never, many of them have never voted for something called a CR. This is a continuing resolution. Basically, just keep the exact same funding levels from the year before and keep them going into next year.
Yeah.
Republicans have been fundamentally against that for as long as I can remember.
Some Republicans.
Yeah. Chip Roy, the Freedom Caucus, the guys who took over the House in 2010, that has become their mainstay. Those guys have said, we're not doing CRs. The other day, yesterday, all of them voted for it except for one guy, Thomas Massie from Kentucky, who I guess is the only true believer left in this post-2010 Republican project.
Yes, and Thomas Massie instantly got a truth/tweet from Trump saying that he was going to be primaried because of it. I do want to point out from the get-go here that we talked a few weeks ago about a budget resolution that the Republicans, supported by Trump, were trying to pass. Kind of one big, beautiful bill to pass everything that Trump wanted to get across with his agenda. And we questioned whether Trump was failing a little bit to wrangle his caucus.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to give him credit for wrangling his caucus.
He wrangled that shit.
Yes, for this being something that is much kind of less politically impactful than the big changing budget that he's about to pass.
Yeah.
But as you just said, like, we've been doing the show for over 2 years. The whole time the Republicans have controlled the House. In none of that time have they been able to unite around passing anything budget-wise. So
this is the first time they did it.
This is because of Donald Trump.
Completely. This is only because of Donald Trump.
Yes.
But there are other important things to say about the CR. It changed funding levels some ways from previous year. It decreased non-defense spending by $13 billion. It specifically went after, it cut women and child food assistance by $500 million.
Okay.
It increased defense spending for $6 billion. It also gave more money to ICE for deportation roundups. So obviously this is not something the Democrats want to vote for.
Yeah,
but this is not what you would call a clean CR.
But to be clear, this like $13 billion is a tiny drop in the bucket.
Yes, out of the vast majority of spending, this is a drop in the bucket.
Yeah.
We can definitely say that wholeheartedly.
Yes.
But now it gets complicated. In the House, it passed 217 to 213.
Yeah.
So that means that while one Republican voted against it, Thomas Massie, one Democrat actually voted for it, and that's Jared Golden from Maine. He's from Maine's 2nd District.
Oh.
Trump has won that district of Maine twice, and Jared Golden decided to vote with them. And now this is when it gets interesting. The CR has to be passed by the Senate. It needs to pass the Senate with 60 votes. It has to overdo the filibuster. Republicans are now relying on Democrats to pass the CR and fully fund Donald Trump throughout the year now.
Yeah, Republicans in the House strategically passed this and then went on an early recess so that the Senate is unable to send the bill back to the House with any revisions that can be forced by Democrats. So now they're putting the onus on Senate Democrats to allow the bill in its current form to pass by the Democrats not filibustering. Otherwise, technically, based on your point of view, the Democrats in the Senate will be responsible for shutting down the government.
Yes. Yes. Now, this gets complicated. Who gets the blame? Mm-hmm. That's a conversation for media heads to have, which I guess it's our job, but I think it's the less interesting part of our job is trying to assign blame.
Well, I mean, the truth is that the blame would be on both.
That is the truth, right? Republicans, no party has ever overseen a government shutdown when they have controlled all 3 branches of government in American history. That has simply never happened.
Yeah.
So Republicans would be the first party to oversee a shutdown while controlling all 3 levers of government.
Mm-hmm.
That is true.
And
it can also be true that Senate Democrats did not agree with the compromise, lack of compromise that Republicans gave to them.
yes, well, I guess what media would talk about and what we should probably talk about is whether it like you blame the Democrats if it feels unreasonable for them to shut down the government in order to pass this bill. You blame Republicans if it feels obvious
Yes.
that the Democrats had to block this bill. And the one sticking point that we need to go into
There we go.
is leaving out language that requires President Trump and the executive branch to actually spend the money allocated in this continuing resolution.
So this is the perfect thing, okay? This is where we have to go with this. Why did Thomas Massie vote no? Thomas Massie voted no because he said Doge found a ton of things that are fraud, waste, or abuse. Why are we funding the fraud, waste, and abuse? If we think all this fraud exists, why is the Congress voting for that fraud? Totally reasonable for a Republican to ask that question. Now, Democrats in the Senate, and what did Thomas Massie try to get to get reassured that that isn't the case? He was told that Donald Trump will use impoundment to not fund these things. Well, guess what, guys? That's illegal.
Yes.
You can't do that.
Yeah.
By train versus New York in 1973 and later enshrined in statute by the Impoundment Control Act of 1974, the president cannot choose to not spend money the way Congress told him to spend it.
And yet, to be clear, that is exactly what has been happening as soon as President Trump took office on January 20th.
He has been breaking the law,
Yes.
breaking the Constitution, running with the fact that he is doing it proudly
Yes.
with his Office of Manager and Budget saying that he is going through with this,
Totally.
even if it's illegal. So now Senate Democrats, House Democrats said, we will vote for the CR as long as you say that you will abide by the Impoundment Control Act. As long as you say you're going to impound, you're going to go by that language, we'll be fine with it and we'll vote for it. But Republicans are not doing that because they know that if they were to go to Congress and try to get these cuts, they wouldn't succeed.
Yes.
And so now Democrats see this, passing this CR as just giving Trump a blank check to continue his practice of what he's been doing, of just cutting whatever the hell he wants. And Democrats want no part in that.
And I don't know. I'm glad that we've now gone through this exercise of explaining it, because to me, it makes it obvious that the blame should land on the Republicans, because all what they have refused to do is just ensure that there is language that aligns this bill with the Constitution.
That's it. That's all the Democrats are asking for.
Yes.
Many Democrats are going to be fine with increasing defense spending. Many Democrats, unfortunately, are going to be fine with decreasing women and infant and child care, nutritional spending. The only cutoff was just tell Trump that he has to follow the Constitution, and Republicans can't even do that.
Just tell Trump that like just put one more line in there that these are not just the rules, but no, really you have to follow these rules that we're
Yes.
writing up for you in this bill.
And the Republicans are refusing to do so.
Yeah.
So if Democrats shoot this down and we go into a shutdown, that gets me worried because it makes me fearful that Donald Trump will abuse his authority in a shutdown way more than he's already abused his authority.
Yeah, and one other thing that we talked about and that we should kind of emphasize here is when a government shutdown happens, it is way less consequential usually than what Donald Trump has already done to the executive branch. Like, he has already neutered the power and the positive role of government, the helpful role of government, far more than what a shutdown would do.
We're going to talk about two stories later in the week, the way he has crippled the Federal Trade Commission and how he's destroying the Department of Education. And we'll talk about both of those things in videos coming up this week. But that is even worse than what would happen in a government shutdown.
Yeah.
When a government shut down, at least when people come back, they get paid
Yes.
furlough,
Yes.
right? They get paid for being out of work. They get paid for that time. That isn't happening anymore. The government is being reduced in size. The missions are being incapable of being accomplished.
Yes, the functions of government are just kind of going by the wayside.
And it's all a part of the Republican plan. So do I blame Democrats for voting this down? No. But again, that's how we'll see how the American media and the American populace takes it.
Well, that's the thing. Part of it is like American media viewers, news consumers they're familiar with the government shutdown. They're familiar with this as a line that is crossed. What Trump has been doing is very novel. And so they don't really have anything to benchmark it against. But as far as a government shutdown, like, Americans know how to interpret it. And I would assume that most media outlets will blame the Democrats because they will be the last defenders at the line to stop this bill from passing. So I do think that the political backlash will fall on the Democrats, even though it shouldn't.